Yeah, so yeah, this one looks like a normal recording notification. So yeah,
Good.
great. Folks are joining. Hello, hello. So yeah, let's wait for a couple more minutes until everyone gets on the call and we will kick things off. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing okay. It's Friday,
Doing
1
great.
o'clock.
Nice to meet everyone.
Hey, nice to meet you. How are you doing today? Good to see you.
Good. Are you Matt, Max?
Good, thank you. Abhishek, hello.
Hey, Matt. Nice to meet you.
Nice
Hey,
to meet
Max.
you as well.
Hey, Ashish. Hi.
Rob, nice to meet you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, hi everyone.
Hello, hello.
Good evening.
Hi everyone. How are you?
Doing just
Awesome.
fine. How are you doing up and around wherever?
That's right.
Yeah, around is probably the best thing I've got right now. At least, unless you're a flat earther, I think around is probably not going to offend too many people.
Flat earther to start my Friday morning.
That's right.
Even the word sort of gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Oh God. Things you didn't think you'd have to argue about in 2020, whatever.
Yeah, actually, when I've met my wife several years ago, we've been like chatting about different stuff, and I've mentioned that those were the COVID times, and like I've mentioned that hey, like a lot of people had those like kinda opinions on everything right now, and considering we've got like plenty of people believing in the fact that the Earth is flat. That does not surprise me. And she was genuinely shocked by the fact that anyone could believe that. So I had to introduce her to the Flat Earth Society, and we spent like one of the most interesting dates in my life by basically doom scrolling like dark web Reddit like subreddits about flat Earth and
Yeah.
taking a look at different like investigations with the guys trying to prove that the Earth is flat by flying around some like South Pole, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that was like a funny thing to do, honestly. So yeah, good times.
Yeah.
How far down you have to go to the rabbit hole, right? I have seen the Netflix documentary
That's right.
about predators. Oh, that's really good. So
Yeah.
fun. Like they actually give them time to exhibit their ideas, and the whole documentary ends with them doing an experiments to show that flat Earth is
Yes.
real, and it actually shows that Earth is round. So
And they realized like, oh, our calculations must be off, or
exactly,
we're doing something wrong. It's like, no, not really. You're doing everything right, except
exactly.
your head. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh
that's
man.
nuts. 1 second, I'll share my screen. So
And
yeah,
what's really
let's.
scary is that if AI has been trained on the internet, then that means it's been trained on all of this AI, this flat Earth
That's
theory.
right. That's
Oh,
right.
So
Should ask.
somebody's going to ask a question in a prompt. Oh
yeah,
man.
that's right now, actually.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, okay, so let's kick things off, and if anyone would decide to join along the way, we'll gladly welcome them to the call. So yeah, hello everyone, welcome to our 20th community call. So this is our small anniversary, and can't thank you enough for everything you've done for the community, and that's absolutely fantastic to see you around. So yeah, guys, please keep up the good work. So please bear in mind that the call will be recorded, and a couple metrics that we've gathered during the recent year, I'd say, and hopefully we will double and quadruple those in the next years. So yeah, looking forward for our 100th community call. We'll see how that goes. So yeah, right now there are almost seven. We are moving towards 1K. Like I'm framing it that way. So we are moving towards 1,000 people, and hopefully we'll see that number in the next couple months. Because, for example, on the April 1st, we've had 700 people, and right now we are moving to the 800, and it's been only 5 days. So yeah, glad you are around. We recorded 20 community calls. You can check them at calls.aiproducthive.com. A lot of useful insights, cool products. We had like absolutely fantastic calls with some of our members, and it's definitely worth checking out. We've almost breached our limit of 10K free messages on Slack, so we are moving towards that. Unfortunately, Slack pricing policy is it's not convenient for large communities because their pricing is per person per month. So we are unable to basically make this community like extended, I'd say, but hopefully in some time Slack would fix that, and maybe we will have the ability to open up our messages. But yeah, that's
Been like how long has Slack been around and I haven't been able to fix the fact that communities can't afford to pay.
honestly,
But
yeah.
it's annoying as hell, but it's what we got to deal with because Slack hasn't got their head out of their ass yet.
What
So,
about Discord? Could we try that?
yeah, we actually looked at that early on, and we found that at the time, a lot of folks already had Slack accounts and they're using it at work. And so we did some evaluation. We were trying to figure it out, but in the end, we said, well, let's try to use Slack. But it is a real challenge. And also there were some issues with Discord and where the data was being stored and who was actually getting hold of data. And I didn't feel comfortable with putting everything on Discord as well. So we went back and forth about it, but the challenge with Slack is that they just haven't figured out a way to support open communities versus businesses who are already, are paying for their service. So anyway, that's where we're at.
So is it primarily they focus on all time and not just we'll delete the older messages and let you have a rolling list?
Yeah, basically.
It's all time.
I see.
Yeah.
So this is an impending, I guess, relatively urgent thing, right? We're about to hit the limit.
Yes and no, I'd say, because if we not if but when we would produce enough content for the 10K message limit. So yeah, basically how that works. Slack will hide your messages either if they are 3 months, they were like 3 months old. So for example, we won't see the messages that are older than 3 months already. Or if you are beyond 10K messages limit. So for example, if we would post 10K messages in couple weeks, for example, we will have like really active community. In that case, the messages would disappear even after a couple weeks if those messages are like, if that's like 11,000 messages, like something like that. So yeah, the issue is, yeah, the issue is that they are trying to basically limit the number of messages that are visible to the community. But yeah, we've got a couple ways to basically bypass that. So we'll find a way to merge eventually.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is what it is. But yeah, for now, it's sufficient for our community, I'd say. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Right.
Yeah, if like for the new members that joined our community recently, we do have the bi-weekly email newsletter, and we are trying to put as much of useful condensed information there as possible. So you can find there like the most interesting conversations that happened on our Slack, as well as latest AI news, some other stuff that might be useful for you. So those would be sent to you automatically. If you don't want to get them, obviously you can unsubscribe. That's like not an obligatory thing. But if you'll find those emails useful, we would appreciate some feedback. So yeah, obviously they are not like they don't have any advertisements or like something like that. Only our stuff that we do have in our community. We had 2 landing page overhauls, I'd say. So it took a lot of time and effort, and right now our metrics are like basically skyrocketing and going through the roof, thanks to our community members who are either contributed to the landing page or like basically build the help to build the page from scratch. So that was a cool thing. Our online presence is also improving. Our domain rating is becoming higher and higher every day with the new backlinks coming in. So yeah, hopefully will become green at some point. 2K website visits from 122 countries. I like honestly, I think those are like the majority of countries that even exist in the world. So yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And the most
Except for
important thing,
Australia. We got nothing from Australia. I don't know what those guys are doing. They're too busy watching Bluey over there. So we'll have to get them involved, but it's probably late for them too. Maybe they can just join on the recordings.
yeah,
Sorry.
we've had a lot of folks from Australia. Some of the most notable ones are, for example, Chris Rickard. We've had him on the community call,
Oh,
but
that's right. That's right.
yeah, that was only one-time gig because he's been to the US for the conference, the AI Conf, and we were able to synchronize our schedule, so to say. But yeah, Australia is the hardest one to synchronize with. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. Maybe somebody will create a branch of AI Product Hive somewhere on the east, and we'll be running community calls earlier, for example. That would be cool. And yeah, some of those stories, this is only a single screenshot that we've had, but this one is absolutely blows my mind until this day. So people inside of our community are so interconnected because they're in the same area that, for example, Mattia and Vince, they presented their tool on one of our community calls, and they were trending on a platform of a person who was on another community call. And the Mattia and Vince product was backed by Yu Chen, who's also a part of our community. So yeah, this kind of interconnectivity between people, it's mind-blowing. People are recommending our community to their colleagues, to their loved ones, even even posting on Instagram. So yeah, that's also a fantastic thing, and yeah, warms my heart. And yeah, people are leaving those feedbacks all over the web. So that's yeah, that's super fantastic. Great to see that. And yeah, thank you.
Very cool.
So yeah, I went a bit over the top with the intro there. I thought I'll make it in 5 minutes, but we can cut the discussion part a bit if we'll be out of time. So yeah, folks, this is our schedule. So obviously it's flexible one. So if you'll need a bit more time, that's not a problem. We've got 45 more minutes. So please welcome Abhishek and Surab for push-shot demo, and patch.codes demo will be presented by Asakanya and Rohan. So yeah, folks, I think you can take it from here, and thanks for the attention. I'll stop sharing my screen right now.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Abhishek. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Kusho AI. Is it okay if I start? Max, anything else that?
I can't stop sharing my screen for some reason. Yeah, if you're
we can't see the
able.
screen.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's got stuck. Yeah, if you can, Matt, if you can stop sharing the screen, that would be neat. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll just start off. Yeah, hi. Again, I'm Abhishek. So nice to meet everyone on this call. Thank you so much for joining in. And yeah, really excited to be presenting what we've built and how Kusho works. With me, I have Saurabh, who's my co-founder and CTO at Kusho AI. We'll keep this short. I think we'll run through what Kusho is, what it does, why we built Kusho in the first place, and maybe we can quickly walk through the product. It's a live product. We've got over 1,000 users from across the globe, spread across Europe, the US, South Asia, and a bunch of other places. We'll have to check if we have users from Australia. I think, like Matt said, we should find out. But yeah, I think going back to Kusho, I think a little bit of an idea from what was there in the intro. AI-enabled testing is the goal. One of our first objectives with Kusho was to automate out something that developers hate doing, but is also extremely critical to their job. When I say developers, I mean software developers. We wanted to remove all the manual work that people put into the effort, all the efforts that they put into testing. And when I say testing, this means back-end testing, front-end testing. Let's say there's UI testing, there's mobile apps that are being tested, etc. Right? So with that goal, I think the first version of Kusho that we build out essentially helps you test out backend code. When I say it helps you test out backend code, what that means is Kusho, think of Kusho as a 100x capable software developer who's in your team, who tests out every single piece of code that's written before it goes into production. And if there's anything that could potentially break, it's going to come up and tell you. This makes the job of the software developer extremely simple. They focus on the creative aspects of their job. They focus on building the code, writing the products, designing software, and they leave the rest to Kusho. I think we can jump straight into the demo, given that we don't really have a lot of time. But yeah, I think the demo will make this a lot easier to understand. I think Saurabh, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, let me do that. Just give me a second.
Yep, we see it.
I hope you can see my screen.
We do.
All right. All right. So let's get started. Let me just start by giving you like a brief introduction of how Kusho works. Like Abhishek mentioned, our goal is how can we offload the API testing work from a dev slate. As you can see here, like this is the Kusho web app. You use this for both uploading your API information and also for executing test cases. The way this works is you bring in your API information in uh, whatever form it is. Like we support Open API specs, we support Postman collections, we support, you can just dump your raw curl commands or even manually enter API details. What Kusho does is it takes those details, analyzes it, like figures out characteristics of your APIs and generates an exhaustive test suite for you, covering various scenarios, as we'll see, which you can execute it right from here. So let me give you a walkthrough. As I mentioned, like we support these formats right now, with plans to like support many more in future. For this demo, I'll just enter the API details manually. These are like some basic details about your API, like what's the URL header, all these things. For this demo, I'll use an API called Alpha Vantage. This is a financial API. Basically, you get stock related information like prices, OHLC data, that kind of stuff from this. So this API has some query params. Let me just quickly copy them here. The way this works is you dump this information here, or if you have imported like your Postman collection or OpenAPI spec, we parse it from those specs. You click on generate, and just a minute. My bad. Let me just refresh this page.
Yeah, I think while this is running, just to add a bit of context to what Saurabh's saying, what Saurabh's done is essentially told Kusho about an API. An API is, let's say, a small part of the backend code that makes up, let's say, a mobile app or a web application. What Kusho does, it understands how each API works. So what Saurabh has done is he's given it the URL of the API, some basic information like some samples. Kusho understands how the API works, what it does, what inputs it takes, what outputs it provides, all of that based on the input information he's providing. Now, what it's doing is, if you can see on your screen, there's the total number of tests that's increasing. Kusho is actually thinking of all the scenarios that could break the API in production when it's live. And it's actually hitting all the scenarios against the API. And it's coming up with each of the scenarios as listed in, as we scroll down the screen. Yeah, I think Saurabh, I think maybe you can take
I see.
over.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And are you using, so you're using the API spec, can you just hand it documentation for the API as well? Like if it's published on a site, or you have a PDF or something available, usually it's going to be a URL, I imagine. Can it read through all that and figure it out? Or do you have to define you have to kind of define things more specifically?
Yeah, I think today we support a few formats, Matt, like you said. If it's in the format of a Postman collection, which is one of the most popular formats that people use to store API documentation, we support that. We also support something called curl. We support something called Open API specification. These are all formats. But like you said, the next step is to just give Kusho an URL. Based on the URL, Kusho passes the page. Let's say it's just written in plain English on a website. Kusho will be able to make sense of that information and do what it's doing.
Yep.
Okay, great.
So it just becomes like one more format from which we need to pass. So yeah, I think I'll just give you a brief overview of what happened. So like Abhishek mentioned, we took the API details. We came up with a bunch of test cases. What we generally do is we try to cover all both positive and negative test cases, trying to make it as exhaustive as possible. Like, as you can see, we cover things ranging from tests about like authentication, about like wrong URL where your fields are missing, wrong format for the data that you have entered, null empty, zero values, all these kind of things. And when I say we generate a test, we also generate the payload, which basically you can just right away execute from here. What we do once the execution is done is that we also analyze the payload, analyze the response, and figure out whether it has passed or failed. So we use some basic assertions out of the box. Like if there are positive test cases, we'll check whether the status code is 200. If it is a negative test case, we'll check whether the status code is 4xs, those kind of things. And on top of that, you can also add your own assertions. Now, we try to make it as exhaustive as possible, but it's possible that we have missed out some test cases. So how do you add it here? So you can basically just in plain English describe what kind of test case you want to add, and we'll add it and generate a payload for it. So for example, let's create a test case with Chinese characters for symbol field. There is a field called symbol, and we'll generate a test case for it, which has Chinese characters, because normally you'll test out a case where, for example, does it handle non-English characters properly or not? So here, as you can see, like we have a symbol field where we have generated a test case which has Chinese characters. This way, if let's say we miss some test cases, you can also add them in like plain English easily. Yeah, I think that's it from mine. Abhishek, anything else that you want to add?
No, I think thanks, Saurabh. I think like Saurabh said, the idea is to cover an exhaustive range of test cases, to actually allow the developer to run through those test cases and figure out what works, what doesn't. Any cases that fail here, the idea is the developer can then immediately go back and make changes. The delta in terms of how a human being does it and how Kusho does it here is that Kusho is able to generate test cases for an API in under 2 minutes, like you saw in this case. Effectively think of, a very complicated backend, like, every standard tech company today will probably have thousands of APIs. Kusho actually, just to start off with, gives you test cases for your entire backend in like 48 hours. And then it keeps it updated based on, changing documentation, changing code bases, etc. So the idea is that there's always this system that's monitoring your code, monitoring your backend, and if there's anything that could potentially go wrong, it actually alerts you to that to make those changes, right? So yeah, I think broadly this is how Kusho works. I think giving you a very, very quick, very brief intro into the product.
This is
Any
great, by
questions
the way.
from folks on the call?
This is really good. Let me ask really quick. I noticed that you have really you're writing, it's generating directed test cases for testing certain situations, right? So for example, you did Chinese characters. I imagine you could also then test, I mean, you're testing the zero or empty value, right? So that's a type of test. And of course, you might check on the maximum length of a field that would be allowed, right? Is another possibility. Do you have ways then of mixing these so that you can run a randomized scenario of many different variations at the same time? So for example, if you had a Chinese characters, but you also had one that had a maximum length, right? Then you would perhaps, try the mixture of those two and allow yourself to evaluate even more scenarios to try to hit corner cases.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I think we plan on introducing more complex cases, which would mean creating combinations of these different scenarios. As of today, we do not support that, but it's definitely something that's on our roadmap. So we plan on introducing more complex scenarios. One way to do which is combinations of different scenarios. It could also mean using real world data. Let's say there's production traffic data that you have, using that to simulate scenarios that could have occurred in the past that are more likely to occur in the future. Things like that. Yeah, absolutely in the roadmap.
And how can I embed Kusha into my enterprise product, for example?
Yeah, so we've got a specialized enterprise product, which looks a little different. I think what we are demoing here is the standalone product, which is a little easier to, just demo for standalone use cases. How it works for the enterprises, things are a little more customized. If you want to run it, we provide you multiple ways to do it. I think some of our customers do it a certain way, some choose other ways to do it. But the idea broadly is that Kusho runs in sync with your CI/CD, which is your deployment pipeline. So let's say you want Kusho to run every 6 hours, every 12 hours, or let's say every time code gets deployed in production, you can configure those things and it runs and creates like a fresh set of test cases that it tells you whether they pass or fail for each API that you have going live. So like I said, a little configurable, but it works with your deployment pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's nice. And what I'm thinking about is that it's B2B first, I think, so that you won't be bothering with like reaching out to users and implementing some features that like for people who are like paying $5 per month, for example. So yeah, that's probably a good thing. So what I'm thinking about also is that maybe you'd like to pass some audits, for example, so that you might say that your software is enterprise ready and people can actually use it inside of the companies and be sure that the data is not going anywhere. But I guess that would mean that you will need to put AI under the hood. So right now you've integrated with OpenAI or something else?
So it's a combination of multiple foundational models that we use. But like you said, right, since the use case is largely enterprise, we are already working, like you said, the security audits, etc., are already underway. We are working with these agencies to ensure that we are completely privacy first, security first. Even though foundational models that we use, we ensure that we stick to more open source ones. We run experiments across the board, but it depends on which function. So it's not a singular call to a foundational model. It's very deeply entrenched with our own models. In fact, a lot of these functions that you need to actually come up with results like this cannot be done by foundational models today. So how we do it is we actually have built our own models. We've trained them in-house and we use them in conjunction with these foundational models to come up with these outputs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to do that, I think. So yeah, glad you moving that way. I can see we've got a question from Amok.
Yeah,
So
I just read it out. Thanks for pointing it out. Hey Amok, hi. So Amok is asking us, how do we interpret what the field means? I think this is intelligence we've built into the product. Kusho today is able to understand, let's say, again, does not cover a host of languages, but in English, it's got an understanding based on, let's say, the kind of API it is. Let's say it's an API for uh, that works within e-commerce. Within e-commerce, let's say there's something called product ID, or let's say there's something called an order ID or a customer ID, for example. The model is able to make sense of it today.
Just
It is able to make sense of most terms in combination with most APIs that work. Again, the coverage here could be somewhere in the late 90s range. It won't, let's say there's something that the model does not understand today. We've done our best to train it. It's a constantly evolving process. But yeah, that's how it's doing it today.
yeah, just to add to that, like most of the time, looking at the field name and the format of the field gives you a fairly good idea what the field means, what's the semantic of the field, and also how it's supposed to be structured. Uh, I think you also asked like what if the fields are not named intuitively. Most of the time we have seen like if you are releasing in production, you'll name it properly. I don't think we'll see this problem. So like in our experiments till now and all the pilots that we have done, we have not seen this problem come across. I hope that answers your question.
Let me mention one more thing. I know that we have to wrap up this portion pretty soon, but I think it's interesting as I think about it that the types of tests that you're running appear to be, I would say, functional. You're trying to see if the API is resolving the endpoint correctly and supporting the error conditions that it needs to support, right? So, but there's another type of testing that you could do that is more behavioral, right? Where you are looking and saying, well, I do not have an authentication token, or I do not have a permission that has allowed me to do something, and so I'm going to go try to do something with the wrong set of permissions, right? And at that point, you would expect that, assuming the endpoint works fine, it could return a code, and it's not anything to do with the validity of how you structured what you passed to the endpoint, but it's the state of the machine, right? It's the state of the back end. And that's a different level of testing. And I wonder if that's something that you plan on tackling, this behavioral type of testing where you're saying, okay, I'm going to go try to do something, but I don't have a proper authentication token, right? So I'm not actually logged in, so I can't do this. Or I'm actually a certain kind of user with a certain role. Now I want to go and do something that is outside of my role. Does it allow me to do that, right? It's a different kind of testing, and I wonder if that's something that you plan on pursuing, or if it's not really the intention of Kusho.
Uh, Sorry, Abhishek, do you want to take that one or?
Yeah, sure. No, I think, Matt, that's an interesting one. I think we've definitely thought of doing this, but couple of things, right? The reason we started from this slightly more simplistic route is because it was a trade-off between how simplistic do we want the tests, etc., to be, and what's the level of accuracy that we can get to. And we figured that, for this level of testing, there's a decent level of accuracy that we can get to that, can make it useful for our users. Something like what you said, right? Scenarios that instead of like, this is almost like, if I've built the API, what would I like to test? But if there's an API that exists, how can I break it, or how could it potentially break? I think that's where you're coming from, right? If let's say I don't have authentication, can I still perform an action? If I can, that's something wrong, right? Things like that. I think those are slightly more complex scenarios. I think that's somewhere we want to get to, but where exactly does it land on the roadmap? Is it 3 months away, or is it more like 9 to 12 months away? That's something that we're still trying to determine. I think it'll depend on what's the levels of accuracy that we can reach with every, subsequent product milestone that we take. So
Well,
like
that makes sense. No problem. you have to have an understanding of the business rules of the application beyond
Yeah.
the specification for the.
Yeah. It's hard to achieve a decent level of accuracy there, which is why, you know, we've not even attempted to put it on the platform yet. But yeah, we definitely plan on getting there.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Does anyone has any other questions? Okay. Okay, guys. So yeah, if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat, and we will be moving on. So yeah, patch.codes, folks, please take it from here.
Hey, thank you, Max. So hi, I'm Asankhya. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Patched. Let me quickly share my screen. So our thesis is actually not very different from what Abhishek and Saurav just described, which is to see how we can unburden the developers from doing some of the tasks that they don't like doing, right? So we started Patched with the notion of like how we can help developers do things like maintenance, vulnerability fixing, library upgrades, code reviews, documentation generation, and so on, right? So that was the basic idea behind Patched. So it's very simple. You just set up your repository, you configure what you want, what flow you want to run, and then you just generate a pull request and you can review it and you can merge it, right? So nothing more, nothing less. What I'll do is I'll just quickly give a short demo so we can log in. So we support GitHub and GitLab, and you can also create your email account. So I'm just going to log in with my GitHub account. Once you log in, you're dropped into a sort of a dashboard, which just gives you some idea of the activities. So how many repositories you have, how many issues have been trashed, how many patches that are generated. Like I mentioned, today we support 4 different workflows. So AutoFix, which is for doing vulnerability fixing. So these are usually results that come from static analysis tools. Then we have pull request review, we have generate readmes and dependency upgrades. You can actually invite people in your organization so that they can view and share the reports. Otherwise, what you usually do is you're going to come here and you're going to integrate. So if you log in through GitHub, we'll register as a GitHub app on your organization. So you can configure the permissions from here. We also support, so we basically support any static analyzer through a standard SARF format. But if you have a Sonar Cloud API, we can actually pull your vulnerability information from Sonar Cloud right here, right? So once you configure your application, you'll see all your repositories here. And we also have a CLI. So if you do not want us to know your repository, you can actually install the command line, and then you can just scan directly from your CLI, right? Just go back here. So what I'll do is I'll quickly run through this one particular application. So this is DDPWA. So this is this application, damn vulnerable Python web application. So it has a few security vulnerabilities. So what you do is you click on patch, and then you have the option of which patch flow you want to use. So we'll just start with the AutoFix. You can choose which branch you want to patch upon, and then what scanner you want to use. So if you have an existing scanner, you can upload your SARF file, which is a standard format in which all SaaS tools output their results. Otherwise, we also support our own default scanners. If you don't select anything, we'll scan it with a open source scanner, in this case, SendGrep. Right, so once we click patched, we will start the scan. My window just here.
So it will create a separate pull request for every feature, right?
It will create a branch. I mean, you can configure it, but the way it works is for each workflow, it will create a particular branch, except for the pull request review, where it would actually comment on a particular branch. So here, so it started running. So all of these actually take a little bit of time. So what I'll do is I'll just let it run. And I'll just show you the run, which I just did a while ago, just to give you a sense of how it looks like. So once it's finished running, you'll get a pull request, and then the pull request will look something like this. This says this fixed 4 issues. You see what are the files that are changed, what were the changes that were made to the file. We click here, see that, okay, move the change from MD5 to SHA-256. Here, I think it changed to parameterized SQL queries, right? So you can see the results. Then the other, so all workflows are very similar. So if you look at this, so this was autofix. Now, if you want to do a dependency upgrade, specify which file you want to upgrade, and you click patched, right? And start running. And I'll just show you what the PR will look like. So it looks something like this. So this pull request fixes for vulnerable dependencies. The file that is changed is requirement of text, and you'll see that it's bumped up the vulnerabilities, right?
Wait, just to be clear, when you supplied it with the new requirements, right? So it's upgrading to the latest versions or whatever versions you define. Is it also going to the code and validating that anything needs to, if anything needs to change?
Not by default, but there is a flag which allows you to do that. So let me just show you an example of that, because that takes a little longer. So in this particular case, it would actually figure out from the dependencies what are the changes between the two versions, and then try to modify the code in order to preserve that. So in this case, the request with the app was changed between 3.0 to 3.1, and it calculates what are the impacted methods, and it tries to modify the code in order to change the impacted methods, right? The reason why we don't do it by default is because the way we implemented it is by actually doing a diff between the old version and new version, and then summarizing the diff using LLMs, and then trying to generate what are the changes that are required in the source app. So it can take a little while longer to do it. But we do have a workflow that can enable you to do that, right? Okay, so this just finished. So this generated those PRs. What you can do is, so for example, this autofix PR, you can actually ask it to review. So what we'll do is here is just go to this third workflow, which is PR review. And then you can choose the pull request you want to review, and then you can click patched. And then in this case, it'll actually pick up this pull request, and it will leave a comment there for us to see. So I just refresh this.
So am I getting it right? Your application both patches the repository and then checks that, like, it runs the checks for that pull request and validates whether everything's fine. That's the.
So it depends on how the workflow is implemented. So I'll just come to it in a bit when I show you the open one. But so this is this is the comment which actually generated. So this code has been updated to these versions. This is what has been changed. So all of these flows are actually built on top of our open framework called Patchwork. So the way Patchwork works is there are two basic things. One is a set of steps, which are these reusable atomic actions you can define. So steps are things like what you would expect to work on a code repository. So things like extract code, create diff, create pull requests, commit changes, and so on. And patch flows are just a combination of these steps which are stitched together, right? So if you go here, come into this. If you look at the autofix, patch flow, all it does is it would scan the repository, then it would figure out the vulnerability. Let me just show you what it does, right? So it just looks like a sequence of steps stitched together, right? So this is each individual class here is actually a step. So it will scan with SendGrep, it will extract the code, it will prepare the prompt, it will call the API, it will extract the responses, it will modify the code, commit the changes, prepare pull request, and then create the pull request, right? So each individual item here is actually a step, and a flow is also a step, but it's a composite step. So you can just arbitrarily combine all of these steps together to create your own flows if you want, right? Within the flow, you can, so if you run it through the service, obviously we have our own API and model that we use. But if you want, you can actually choose all of this yourself. So by default, we use GPT 3.5, but you can actually change it. So you can change it to any model which is compatible with the OpenAI endpoint. So you can replace it with, say, for example, any Hugging Face model, or you can also do local inference if you run Llama CPP server. So you could just run it entirely locally. So which is what I have here, for instance. So if you just run your Llama server, then you can just run, and I think I ran some examples here. So you can just give your endpoint localhost as your endpoint, and then you can just send your queries here, and it'll do the inference, right? So the dependency upgrade, because I think you asked about that. So we do have a flag which is analyze impact. In this, we would actually try and get a diff between the vulnerable and fixed versions of the library and determine a set of impacted methods. And then we'll analyze your repository, figure out if you're actually calling those impacted methods. And then we'll prompt the LLM to migrate those code in your repository, right? So these prompts are also customizable. So for example, these are the prompts used for dependency upgrades. You'll note here that there are some variables which are interpolated at runtime. So you can actually define some parts of the prompt which is static. The other parts of the prompt are actually prepared by the step you call in. So in your code, when you generate updates, the patchwork would actually replace them with the actual thing that comes here, right? So this dependency upgrade step has 3 sets of prompts. So one is just this, which does the upgrade of the dependencies. The other is which gets the impact. So given the the old and new version of the library, the diff figure out what is the change. And third one is which is does the migration. So all these 3 are actually stitched together in the workflow. So if you look here, so this is kind of how it looks like. So first, we analyze using this tool, open tool called DepScan, which figures out the vulnerable dependencies. We extract the package manager file, and then even if the flag analyze input is set, if we have to do an analysis, we'll extract the diff, then prepare the prompt where we get the impacted methods and then migrate the code, right? Otherwise, we'll just jump straight to the dependency upgrade. So depending on how large the diff is, it may go out of context, and that's why we don't run it by default, but it can actually generate migration. So I just showed you an example, but this is just another more realistic case where it's a Gradio sample app where there is some change between the old and new version of the repository, and it's able to actually migrate the changes to the new API, right? So you can obviously run the patchwork on the app like I just showed, but if you don't want to use our app, you can run it through the open framework as well directly from the CLI. You can also run all of them through a CI or through a GitHub action. So in fact, in our own repository, we use it quite often. So we build patchwork using patchwork. So we run them through our CLI and the actions, right?
So I imagine you're using this yourself for development of patchwork.
Yeah. So all the documentation, so I didn't show, this is the last one which I wanted to show us, which is you can also use it to generate, for instance, documentation. So this was kind of a repository. Now, if we want to say, I want to go down here, SQLi, and utils, or this folder, just copy this path. And so this was the last patch flow, which is if you want to generate a README, you can actually set it up and then let it run. And once it's done, it would actually generate a pull request with the README inside. Right. What is the inputs and outputs? And that's so if you go to our repository, you'll see that we actually make heavy use of all that. So all the documentation for all of this is actually generated with Patchflow. So these are all individual steps. So they describe what are the inputs and what are the outputs that are used. So that if you are actually trying to build your own step, you have all the documentation. We also try generating some tests, but that workflow is not here. So, but it's actually quite relatively easy to generate unit tests as well. So, but that's some of the things we haven't really done yet. For example, for some of these flows, we take into account a lot of the things that you would have to do if you implemented yourself. For example, context size and what are the places where you need to make changes within your code if you're doing the migration. So we have implemented all of that for 3 libraries. So we do parse all the code and we actually figure out the right context. So you don't have to do it yourself. You can use the step. So that's the benefit of actually using step and building on top of it. I think that's it. Yeah. Any questions?
Actually, not a question, but for this tremendous amount of work, the amount of stars that you've got on the GitHub, it's like
so let me just say I just opened it like for this. So actually, I'm supposed to present this next week at Black Hat Asia under Arsenal as a tool. So we were just waiting for that to open source it. So we hadn't open sourced it, but we had this call thankfully today. So I thought I'll just do it. So, but we've had the app for a while. We started in early this year. But yeah, so this well, I would love to have some more stars. Yes. But we just literally just the plan was to do it next week, but I had this call here, so I thought we'll just do it today. Yeah.
Wow. So basically, right, like we are extremely honored to be the like basically the place where the like your tool was presented. So yeah, that's fantastic. Honestly, I have not expected that. So yeah, thank you very much. That's an event, you know, when during the community call something gets released. That's
Yeah.
like
You've all done a good job. This is really nice. I got to tell you, it seems like it's really well done. Especially that you're
Thank you.
using it. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as we say, right? So if you can use it on your own development of the application, you know, then I think the universe is just going to end at that point because we're having the machine building itself.
I mean, we just saw the reason we actually ended up building the framework is because we saw that we have to do something very similar, or a lot of other companies have to do something very similar when it comes to development workflows, which is everybody has to, you know, at the end, there's like some model, there is some, you know, workflow related to Git, and then there is like all these places where you want to run it, IDE, CI, CD, and everything else is just, you know, can be customizable. So that's why we built it in this way, where you can choose switch off the model, you can choose and switch the, you know, the scanner and results and so on, and then you can just glue all this together using the framework.
Yeah, that's super cool. Have you considered any integration? So for example, I can see how Pusher can test something after like you will apply some merge requests to the repository with the patched codes, for example. So have you considered some integrations for the
Yeah,
future?
so yeah, we started with the vulnerability, so we integrate with all the scanners, so SEMGREP, you know, I saw Sonar. We also integrate like commercial vendors, so like Veracode, Checkmarks, all the big players through the SARIF file format. Then on dependency scanning, we use DepScan, which is this OWASP tool to do it, and we also you can actually use any SBOM creating tool. So, but for each scan or each tool that you need to support, you need to add like one step. So we haven't added, but it's fairly easy to add a new tool to support it. And you just saw the inputs and outputs are just stitched together through. We in future we do plan to have like a workflow UI where you could actually just drop these nodes and then you could just join them together, so you don't even need to write Python code to do it.
Yeah, and the huge thing is that you are open source, and for the GitHub community, that should be a blast. I think you will have like zero issues with marketing and trending and etc. So yeah, that's super cool because people will be using your tool easily within the community, and since you're open source, yeah, as Matt mentioned, there is some recursion that might happen there. So I have no idea how your Hacktoberfest would go on with people basically applying the fixes to the repo made by your application. So yeah, I think Hacktoberfest is no more from this year on, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, for those folks who don't know, Hacktoberfest is a yearly event hosted by the GitHub and what's the company? I forgot. But
DigitalOcean.
Yeah, DigitalOcean. So yeah, DigitalOcean basically sponsors that, and this is basically the celebration of the open source activities, and people are creating merge requests, like the pull requests, and asking like the repo authors to merge them, and you get the swag if you will if your merge requests would be merged into the repo. So yeah, that's the whole thing. But yeah, usually people are kind of fixing the README. So yeah, that probably would be an easy thing to do with patched codes. So yeah, does anyone have any other questions?
let me just ask, is this currently in an environment where other clients are using it right now?
Yeah, so the service has been there. We had it for like 3 months now. So we have some early POCs going on. We have some users on the app. The open source framework is what we were originally planning to release next week, but now we just did today. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So,
Okay.
and we originally started with just one flow. So up until just yesterday, we were only patching security vulnerabilities because that's was mostly our background. And the previous company I used to work for, so I used to work for Veracode prior to this.
Okay.
But now we support all these multiple flows and so on. So we just added this week.
Very
from-
good. Okay. Well, please keep us posted how the big launch goes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Please
Yeah.
do.
hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll be rooting for you. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and we'll try to help with everything we can. So we've got like a kinda a media resource already. Sorry, words are failing me a bit tired today. But yeah, the case is that we do have like an email newsletter that obviously will feature your tools and both patched codes and the kosher. And yeah, we've got some social media presence already, a lot of cool influencers inside of the community. So yeah, I can definitely see how we can help you with that. So yeah, please keep us posted. We'll do our best to support you.
Yep, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, I
Right.
think we've got a couple minutes left, so it would be hard to squeeze in the discussion part. So probably we'll leave it for later.
Been a good time.
Yeah,
Well, that was cool.
yeah.
This was really good. I was really happy to get to meet everybody and to see all these products being developed, leveraging AI. We're just going to see more of them, and it's great to be on the front end and seeing it happen and launch in real time. So well done, everybody.
Yeah, fantastic work. Okay, so yeah, I guess that's it. So not saying goodbye. We will see you in our Slack, hopefully on the next calls as well. So yeah, folks, have a great rest of your days. Thanks everyone who joined during the night. I know it's a bit late in India, so yeah, thank you very much, and see you around. Take
Okay,
care.
thank you guys. Okay,
Take care,
bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank
Amazing product, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Unbelievable.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.